I have made a powerful enemy. There's approximately 80,000 pigeons that roost within the Prague city limits. They roam through the farmers' markets looking for drops of food. They sit on the Art Nouveau windowsills that loom near the city center. Every figure of Czech history who has been rewarded with a statue is also rewarded with a pigeon patron who will sit and shit on top of their heads for all eternity. Every inch of the city is filled with those grey birds. But not today. As the farmers' markets get set up, the peddlers mumble to themselves about the surprising lack of avian companionship. The twilight commuters look up at the bare windowsills and try to figure out what has changed in the architecture of the city overnight. The layer of droppings on Winston Churchill's head is at least a day old. This morning, as the city slowly rustles awake to the meaty tones of cell phone alarms, the pigeons are gathering outside of the main train station. They're here because of me. The birds hate me for what I have done. For weeks, I have only traveled by night. For weeks, I have been avoiding the inevitable. For weeks, I had hoped they would simply forget. But they didn't. And I know they won't. The birds will not let me live freely until I pay for what I have done. I set out this morning to bring the feud to a rest. But as I emerge out of the subway and see what awaits me beyond the plexiglass windows, I get second thoughts. The park outside the automatic doors of the train station has been swallowed up in feathers. From the sea of grey, hateful beads of crimson stare at me. They are waiting. There's 2 bags filled with Bohemia Bakery croissants in my hands. I can't control the shaking. I can't deny the inevitable. As the loudspeakers squawk out announcements of delays in a dozen muffled languages, I can't help but to think about how I got here. There has to be a better word for it than breakup. We were engaged for the better part of a year, sharing a bed for 5 and dating for 7. A breakup sounds like a cracked plate, a minor inconvenience, something that you shrug off and carry on with your life. What happened between Julia and me was a multi-ton hydrogen bomb. She said I never introduce her to work friends. So I did. I introduced her to the IT guy who I would occasionally grab beers with after work. She got to know him more intimately than I ever did. Much more intimate. Suddenly, the person who was my one constant over the past 7 years was telling me we could still be friends. Suddenly, the comfortable pad in the center that was affordable from 2 paychecks was replaced by a 5-person flat share in the housing projects. Suddenly, I couldn't show my face in the office anymore. He set up the remote work software on my laptop. It took 15 minutes, but that moment dragged on for eternity. He mumbled an apology. My hand tightened into a fist. The uncapped pen on my desk gleamed with sharpness, but I remained impotent. He regularly went to the gym. I didn't. When he finished the setup, he offered me his hand, and without thinking, I shook it. I even mumbled a thank you. I wanted to rip off my tongue and throw it out for the birds to devour. Working from home was impossible. Not only was I in the midst of a personal cataclysm, but my 4 roommates had social lives so loud and amorous that they seeped through the paper-thin walls every second of the day. Whenever they brought someone home, there was no escape from the echoes of lovemaking. I knew that back in my old apartment, in that cozy flat in the center, Julia was screaming the IT guy's name. I had been with her for long enough to be able to imagine it all so vividly. I needed to get out of that house.
Bohemia Bakery croissants. That's a good treat right there, brother.
The voice, followed by a familiar smell of distillates and festering bandages, drags me back into the present moment. Outside, the congregation of pigeons is slowly growing. In front of me, a Prague train station vagrant.
Got a little of those croissants there, brother? Mind helping a hungry fella out?
He looks like he's been through a war zone. His tattered rags, the uniform of an army that loses in perpetuity. Beyond the plexiglass, the pigeons stare. I give the homeless man one of the croissants. I do this partially out of human kindness, but mainly in hopes that the pigeons see that I am not a monster, that the pigeons take pity on me. The sea of beady eyes doesn't flinch. They don't care.
God bless, brother, God bless,
the vagrant says as he starts to walk away. He stops. After considering the crowd of pigeons, he turns back to me.
A lot of pigeons, eh? God bless, brother.
He sets off towards the doors, and I know I should follow him. I know it's time for me to pay the price for my sin. I know there's no other way to get rid of the birds, but my legs are frozen. When the homeless man is a couple of steps away from me, a dark thought enters my mind. Maybe I can trick the pigeons into taking their revenge on someone else. They're pigeons. How smart can they be? I open my mouth to yell out to him. I want to give him another croissant. I want to suggest he take both the bags of offerings. I want to make him the target of the avian hatred. But before I can vocalize my offer, the plan falls apart. The vagrant walks past the automatic doors into the park outside. The pigeons pay him no mind. He's completely invisible to them. They are here for me, and they're getting impatient. As the automatic doors grind to a close, 3 pigeons fly into the station. I reach into my Bohemia Bakery bag and start turning croissants into crumbs between my fingers. The birds are getting restless. Walking into the Bohemia Bakery on Mihalska Street and setting up my laptop for a day of Excel scrolling was a completely arbitrary decision. There are hundreds of corporate-owned coffee shops in Prague that have stable Wi-Fi and inoffensive Spotify playlists for ambience. I ended up there completely by accident. Yet as soon as I got settled, I knew I wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. Bohemia Bakery had all the makings of a coffee shop office. The refreshments were cheap enough to be consumed without a second thought. The neighborhood was safe enough to quell any fears about my laptop being stolen, and the majority of customers were locals. I have no qualms with tourists or immigrants, but American clientele does have a tendency to turn their private conversations into public 3-act plays. The chatter in the coffee shop was limited to complaint-filled grumbles, as is Czech custom. The good work environment that Bohemia Bakery provided, however, was completely irrelevant to why I kept on coming there day after day. From the moment I saw her, my visits to Bohemia Bakery ceased to be work-related. I kept on coming for Bara. I was in a dark place. Every other morning I woke up to the messages that I had sent to Julia in the middle of the night and forgotten about.
I'm scared I'll forget the smell of you. You're a scab I can't stop picking. Remember when we made love in the mountains?
The response was always the same.
Jesus, Mark. Stop sending me these messages.
The texts were desperate attempts to change her mind about moving on. Somewhere in the depths of my soul, I was still 16 and believed that any poetic message could turn back the clock on years of stagnant relationship. I was sick with heartbreak. There was no one out who could make me happy like Julia did. The moment I saw Bara, I knew that was a lie. She made the question cash or card sound like a line of sensuous poetry pried from the throats of love-struck bards. When she prepared orders, she didn't move like a 20-year-old barista. She floated behind her counter like a goddess examining the offerings that were being burnt in her temple. That unflattering grey and gold uniform that Bohemia Bakery would force on their employees to wear looked downright erotic on her. God forbid, when the milquetoast music the coffee shop had turned to something with an actual beat. If there weren't any customers, Bara would quietly dance. I tried not to stare. I wasn't very good at that. She didn't mind. I stayed in the coffee shop for much longer than my job demanded. When I was around her, all thoughts of Julia seemed absurd. Bara kept on smiling and winking, and occasionally she would stick out her pierced tongue at me. After a week of nervously sneaking peeks at the coffee shop Venus, I asked her out. After her shift was over, we went to sit in a nearby park. There are so many parts of that night that have made themselves permanent in my memory. The way her hand slipped into mine before we even reached the park. The smell of cherry blossom and bubblegum that stemmed from her neck. The way her piercing clinked against my nervous teeth. The way she looked up at me when we made love. But none of the memories are as permanent in my head as the words she said when she threw out crumbs of stale croissants to the pigeons that gathered around us in the park.
Ever looked a pigeon in the eyes? Ooh, they're angry creatures. And they talk. Always better to stay on their good side.
Even as those tiny beaks pick at the droplets of dough scattered across the dirty tiles of the train station, the pigeons keep their beady eyes locked on me. There are more than a few of them now. The out-of-towners who come to Prague for work from the countryside are keeping the automatic doors opened wide. For each person that leaves the train station, a pigeon sneaks its way in. The people might be leaving for different jobs, but the aim of the birds is singular. Their aim is revenge. An Uber Eats driver waiting for his next order plays a melody on one of the pianos that the city council has strewn across the city. He stops as I walk by him. The procession of pigeons behind me is impossible to ignore. People keep looking at me. I'm sweating. I know what's coming. I know there's only so long the pigeons are willing to wait for justice. I know how this all ends. But still, there's a part of me that wants to ignore the reality of my situation. Out of habit, I take out my phone and text Julia.
There's a group of pigeons chasing me through the train station. They mean me harm. Help!
Her living situation could have been better. Bara shared her 2-bedroom flat with 3 other girls from her hometown. On most nights, the only thing that kept our love-making sessions out of Bara's roommate's eyeline was the sheet we draped from the bookshelf. She moved out from the countryside with her 3 bestest friends to go live the crazy cosmopolitan life out in the capital. I don't think Bara's roommate felt very cosmopolitan on the nights I stayed over. There were also the pigeons. The mattress that Bara slept on was propped up against the window to the balcony, and every morning I would wake up to the cooing of sky rats. They usually managed to catch me about 15 minutes before my alarm clock went off, and they were a gentler welcome to the waking world than the blaring of the MIDI tones of my phone. But the constant cooing definitely made the Sunday morning cuddles less romantic. Pigeons and roommates aside, the first couple of months of our relationship went smoothly. All thoughts of Julia floated away. I felt no need to send her weird texts or obsess over whether she was still thinking about me. I was just enjoying my Bohemia bakery beauty. An old classmate of Bara's came to visit. She knew all about me. Bara had spent the past couple of weeks preparing this girl to meet her super cool boyfriend. And whilst meeting a person who knew more about me than I knew about them would have intimidated me back when I was dating Julia, I didn't mind by then. I had grown into my role. I didn't know what made me cool, or even what made Bara like me so much. But after months of living on my new lucky reality, I stopped questioning it. Bara stole a couple of bottles of wine from the bakery and invited me over to get drunk with the rest of the apartment. I had the most minor of moral qualms about Bara's theft, but after a couple of glasses, my dislike of stealing became a purely hypothetical topic rather than an actual source of bother. I listened to the four girls drunkenly tell stories from the countryside.
Holy shit.
Bara's visiting friend said after the fourth bottle of wine had been drained,
We're the only ones from our graduating class who don't have any kids yet?
I laughed. Hard. I was etching towards my early 30s, and the thought of producing offspring seemed like something that wouldn't happen for a long, long time. The idea that somewhere out in the countryside people were getting married at the tender age of 20 seemed absurd to me. As I laughed, Bara kept her glass pressed to her lips. She drained it, poured another, and topped me off in the process. We drank more. The other roommates went out clubbing. I was left alone with Bara and her visiting friend. We drank more. The three of us got drunk enough to lay down on the mattress. One moment I was splashing water in my face trying to sober up, and the next I tasted a kiss drenched in menthol cigarettes and red wine. The tongue that was caressing mine felt different. There was no piercing. I opened my eyes in terror, realizing that I was not kissing my girlfriend. Bara's friend looked at me sheepishly. A familiar hand ran down my back.
It's okay, honey. It's not like we're married yet. We can share.
I awoke with a horrible hangover the next day. It felt like my eyes were about to pop out of my skull and take everything I had ever eaten in the past 24 hours along with them. But two naked bodies next to me assured me that my pain was temporary. Overall, my life was good. With the help of the gentle cooing from the balcony, I went back to sleep. Then things changed. We were sitting on the tram riding out to the farmer's market to grab something to eat. The type of lull where you throw out a random observation or a Facebook article headline in hopes of having something to talk about. She mentioned it as if it was the most casual thing in the world, as if it wasn't a matter of any importance at all.
Missed my period 3 days ago.
I think the lady at the ticket office is calling animal control. There's a good 30 pigeons behind me now. I had been mobbed by them before, back in the early days, before I knew they were after me. They'd chase me while I was going out for groceries or out drinking. There would always be, however, a confused driver or subway to help me escape. I've never tried to face the pigeons. I started making my way towards the doors. This charade has been going on for long enough. I try to trick myself into believing that the pigeons will go easy on me, that they won't really hurt me. Yet as I walk towards the automatic doors, one of the birds jumps up and pecks at my jeans. Those beaks are sharp. Sharp enough to give me second thought. Sharp enough to make me think that maybe the solution to my qualm with the pigeons is to pack up and move. I try to think of a country without pigeons. I can't, but I presume there is one. There has to be one. Deciding to move my life instead of paying for what I've done, I start making my way down into the subway. They follow. But that's fine. I convince myself that's fine. As soon as the subway is about to arrive, I can just break into a sprint and hop on. No way all 30 of them can follow me. Worst case scenario, I'll be locked up in a metal tube with 2 or 3 angry pigeons. I could take on those if needed. I've killed pigeons before. Well, theoretically at least. We didn't talk about it. Well, we did, but not really.
Missed my period 3 days ago.
Oh shit.
Oh, don't worry.
You sure?
Yeah.
Then we moved on to talking about something else. For the whole day, there was no discussion of Bara's potential pregnancy. But from the moment that she mentioned it, a cold sweat broke over me. Somewhere in the back of my head, I had started to imagine her as a lifelong partner. I didn't like what I saw. What I once thought of as a face of perfection was now just a disparate collection of sharp facial features with crooked teeth. Her voice, her laugh, it all droned in my ears in a horrible, annoying way. I tried to remind myself not to be shallow, not to judge the woman I had been dating for nearly half a year based on her looks. That made the situation significantly worse. As we were walking around the farmer's market, Bara started eating a sandwich. I knew that she didn't buy it. I knew that she didn't bring one. I knew she stole it. Bara liked to steal shit. I didn't mind her swiping stuff from the bakery, didn't have empathy to spare for corporate-owned franchises. But Bara stealing stuff from old folks got under my skin. Hey, where did you get that sandwich?
Found it on the floor.
She gave me a smile and a wink. I started to miss Julia again. By the time we got home, the feverish dislike that I was starting to develop for Bara had turned physical. My head throbbed with some horrible strain of the flu that had crept into my system. I considered going home, but Bara assured me that the wave of fatigue I was feeling was just sleep deprivation. All I needed to do was take a nap, and I'd be right as rain. I was too tired to argue. By late afternoon, I was fading in and out of consciousness on Bara's mattress, as she piled more and more blankets on top of me.
Aw, come on, just sweat it out, babe. Ugh, quit complaining. You're a real man, aren't you?
Her voice cut through my migraine like the stolen cutlery she had in her kitchen. What made the sickness-induced delirium so much worse were the pigeons on the balcony. They just kept on cooing. Even as I drifted off into frenzied fever dreams, I could sense their dirty, feathered bodies rustling behind the paper-thin walls.
What if I actually am pregnant?
I heard a voice ask out of the darkness. It was far too deep in the sweaty, lethargic limbo to identify the source, but through context clues I figured out who was asking. I pretended to be asleep.
What if I actually am pregnant?
Bara asked. Again, this time prodding me with her frigid foot. I let loose a torrent of mucus-filled coughs, hoping to dissuade her from trying to talk to me. It didn't work. Her cold toes ran across my burning abdomen.
Mark? What if I actually am pregnant?
She asked sweetly. Can we talk about this tomorrow? I groaned.
Sure.
She hissed with the intensity of a silenced pistol. Bara's roommate was snoring. The pigeons outside were cooing, and just as I started to get used to the jarring soundscape of the bedroom, Bara started to sob next to me. I pretended to be asleep, and eventually I was. I make my way down the stairs to the subway platform with dreams of escape glowing in my heart. I could grow a shitty beard and live in some cabin in the woods or lounge around on some exotic beach, or I could be freezing my ass off in the Arctic. The only important thing is getting on that subway and riding off to somewhere where there are no flying rats that demand vengeance. the screeching of metal. Below me, the subway has just arrived. I hold on tight to the railing and start jumping down the stairs 2 at a time. I'm praying that the doors of the train will stay open long enough for me to make my escape. Some of the birds stop hopping down the stairs and ascend into flight. The feathers of the pigeon fit right into the metallic grey of the subway station in the worst possible way. There's a new mother who doesn't quite know how to handle a stroller stalling the doors to the subway. I still have a chance. I can still run in and make my escape. But just as I'm descending the last 3 steps towards the platform, one of those beady-eyed vermin dives straight at me. I lift my hand off the rail to shoo the pigeon away, shifting my balance. Suddenly I'm falling. Suddenly my head crashes against the concrete. Suddenly I'm back on my feet, running towards the subway, screaming past the burning pain that has materialized in my ankle. I slam into the closed doors. Everyone on the train stares at me and my bizarre pursuers in horror. Except for the baby. The baby points and giggles and laughs from its carriage as the train slowly rumbles into life and disappears into the dark tunnel. The next train is coming in 8 minutes. I'm at the edge of the platform and there's a good 50 pigeons staring at me.
Jesus, you were still here?
I woke up to the sound of Bara's roommate angrily stomping around the bedroom. My fever was gone, but somehow it had managed to carry me into the late afternoon.
It smells like a friggin' sex dungeon here, dude. Least you could have done was pop open a window.
She towers over me, eyes filled with disgust, as she cracks open the balcony windows.
And you should definitely talk to Bara. It's none of my business, but when she left to work today, she was gross. Ew.
Gross? I sat up on the mattress. The roommate didn't look at me, she just kept staring out of the window. Bara was gross?
No, you idiot. Look outside. No wonder those birds have been waking us up every morning. There's a goddamn nest on the balcony.
As soon as the moist covers slid off me, the dizzying stench of sweat overpowered any amount of fresh air coming in from the window. Bara's roommate jumped back in disgust, and with a barrage of comments about how disgusting I am, she left. Among the discarded plastic bags and cigarette butts, there was a roughly picked home of straw. In it there were 3 little eggs that looked like dirty, oversized Tic Tacs. Bara's roommate pressed a broom into my head.
Go.
Go where?
Go push that shit off the roof. Carry diseases, you know.
Why me?
Why you? Because you're a freaking man. Act like it.
Memories of the IT guy setting up my remote working software crawled through the back of my head. I grabbed the broom and went out to the balcony, intent on proving my masculinity. All I had to do was just push the nest off into the street below, and Bara's roommate would get off my back. Yet as soon as I got outside on the terrace, I realized I wasn't alone. On the neighbor's windowsill, just a meter or 2 away from the nest, was a pigeon. The bird's feathers were fuller than any other pigeon that I had ever seen. Its eyes shone in a blood-red, hateful glow. This was no ordinary pigeon, and it was watching me. I moved up the broom to the edge of the nest, but my arms froze. Something about that animal's blank expression was telling me that I was about to take a step into a world from which I could not return. Something was telling me that I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. An ancient Hammurabi-era truth loomed behind those red orbs. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You harm my young, and I will harm yours. The front door opened. I could hear Bara's tired voice.
Is my man still here? Yeah. Your middle management looking dude is out on the balcony, trying to work up the balls to get rid of a pigeon nest.
I heard her roommate say. The passive-aggressive insult didn't even register with me. I was lost in the showdown with the pigeon. Those eyes meant business, and that beak looked sharp enough to break the skin. I could pick up the nest and take it outside. I could put it in a tree. I could Google how to deal with this situation. There were so many things that I could have done, but before I knew it, there was a pair of cold hands wrapped around the broom. Bara pressed her body against mine, and before I knew it, the broom did its job. The pigeon's eyes went wide. Like a paper aeroplane covered in gravel, the nest tumbled down into the street with the gentlest crunch. Within seconds, it went from being a bastion of blossoming life to being some leashless dog's dinner.
Come inside. We need to talk.
No kiss. She was angry. The pigeon's eyes were still locked on the crushed eggs running over the pavement. A wave of self-loathing washed through my chest. It was time for an apology. I cleared my throat. The pigeon's eyes quickly darted back to me. That wide-eyed expression of shock quickly faded away. The balls of red that dwelled in the creature's skull turned into focused, hate-filled dots. Look, I'm so... The bird launched at my tongue. My avian predicament catches the attention of a group of Chinese tourists gathered on the other side of the platform. For a split second, the shuddering of cameras rises above the cooing. But as the pigeons get closer, the clicks and flashes became imperceptible static. The pigeons have me cornered. I've started throwing the croissants from Bohemia Bakery at them wholesale. But for every pigeon I distract, there are 5 more that are thirsty for blood. They're thirsty for revenge. The birds hate me for what I've done. With my back up against a map of the Prague subway station, I look up at the next arrival board. The red numbers glare. 5 minutes, 36 seconds, and counting. I fire off another text to Julia.
The birds will punish me for what I've done.
I look out into the sea of grey and see a familiar set of red dots. The bird whose children I killed leads the march. I don't have 5 minutes. I don't even have 36 seconds. Wings flutter. The birds take flight. With closed eyes, I pray that my punishment will be swift. It isn't. My skin burns with blood as the razor beaks bite into me. My hands barely cover my eyes as the pigeons try to claw at my face. They drag at my hair, they tear at my clothes, they peck at my jeans. My agony reaches incomprehensible heights. With each bite of flesh they take, however, a sliver of my consciousness fades away. Before the pigeons get to the worst of their punishment, I black out. We sat in her kitchen, me pressing a packet of frozen peas to my tongue and her nursing a cigarette lit off the stove. Smoke drifted from her nostrils as if she was a passive-aggressive dragon.
Thanks, I don't know what kind of that bird.
My numb, bleeding tongue didn't get my point across very eloquently, but Bara understood what I meant. Those hazel eyes burrowed into me, watching every twitch in my face.
Not pregnant.
She finally said.
Had my period this morning.
That's great!
I yelled, sending a trickle of iron into my mouth. I grinned. That was the first good news I'd heard all day. She wasn't smiling.
What if I actually was pregnant?
She took a drag and looked away from me. Whatever nuanced reaction my face made wasn't to her liking. The conversation dragged on into eternity, and at each turn I said the wrong things. Even if my mouth wasn't slowly filling up with blood, even if my tongue didn't have a beak-imposed lisp, I don't think I could have salvaged that relationship. I didn't notice the bird at first, but as soon as I became aware of him, it was impossible to fully focus on what Bara was saying. Right behind her, with my blood on his beak, was my red-eyed enemy. Soon friends joined him. The longer Bara and me spoke, the bigger our audience got. I left the apartment, newly single, with blood in my mouth and a toothbrush in my pocket, and started making my way towards the bus station. I was about to fire off a text to Julia to let her know I was still in love with her, but before I could unblock her number, something small and sharp snapped at my scalp. The flock of enraged pigeons descended me from the windowsills of the Soviet-era housing projects. If there wasn't a subway station nearby, I probably would have lost an eye. At first I'd hoped that the assault from the pigeons was simply a rare occurrence of an angry parent, yet they followed me everywhere. For months I lived my life in fear, desperately hoping that they would tire of chasing me. But it became clear that the birds could not leave me alone. They wouldn't leave me alone until I paid the price. I keep staring out of the window. This makes the doctor visibly uncomfortable. He tells me about how my body was rushed into surgery, about how there is a good chance I have contracted a fair amount of diseases, about all of the permanent damage that the pigeons had inflicted on me, but I just kept looking out of the window. I had an educated guess on the extent of the pigeons' revenge. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You harm my young and I'll harm yours. The doctor eventually gives up on trying to elicit a reaction out of me and leaves me alone in my room. And I am alone. The windowsill is empty. The pigeons have had their revenge. I breathe out a sigh of pained relief. I got a text message from someone who makes my heart flutter. I look back at the conversation. Me, 5:16 a.m.
There's a group of pigeons chasing me through the main train station. They mean me harm. Help!
Me, 5:24 a.m.
The birds will punish me for what I have done.
Julia, 7:02 p.m.
What's wrong?
In the stillness of the hospital room, I type out my reply. My explanation. As soon as my scarred thumbs punch the words into reality, a weight is lifted off my chest. A chapter of my life has ended. I am free now. Me, 7:02 p.m.
It's okay. The pigeons have punished me for my misdeeds. I am scarred, and I will never be able to have children, but I am a free man. I love you.
Julia, 7:03 p.m.
Jesus, Mark. Stop sending me these messages.